Hey there, friend. It's Hector here, the Kettlebell coach. In this video, we're going to be starting a new video series on upstream thinking and what exactly that means. Particularly, we're going to be talking about upstream strength strategies and what this has to do with using kettlebells to build a stronger, leaner, and more capable body in less time. But first, if you're new to the channel, my name's Hector Gutierrez Jr., and for over 14 years now, I've been teaching men and women 40 plus how to use kettlebells to build a stronger, leaner, and more capable body in about 90 minutes per week so they can ultimately have more time to do things that they enjoy doing and less time trying to be the best at exercise. If that sounds like you, welcome to the channel. And if you are new to the channel and you need help building a better body in less time, check the first link in the description section. I've got a free gift for you. It's our 4-week strength program. What is upstream and what does it mean to think upstream? So the first time I heard this phrase and this idea was in Dan Heath's book called Upstream. And the whole premise of the book was how to solve problems before they have an opportunity to present themselves. And that got me thinking of, what does that look like in the context of strength training, self-development, you name it. And I realized that I was already teaching a lot of these ideas. I just didn't have a name for it. And that's what we're going to talk about today is what it means to think upstream with respect to your strength training, your health and fitness results, etc. Thinking, you have upstream thinking, and then you've got downstream thinking. So thinking downstream is ultimately a reactive response. Example, you've gained weight. Now it's time to get healthy, right? You got injured. Now I need to start working on my mobility, my flexibility, my strength work, etc. So those are reactive responses. That's downstream thinking. Thinking upstream is about solving the problem before it has an opportunity to present itself. But this is not to be confused with being proactive. Being proactive and thinking upstream are not the same thing. Being proactive is working out regularly, eating foods that are aligned to your goals so that way you don't become unhealthy. That would be an example of being proactive. Thinking upstream requires you to expand your thinking. So, in the context of health and fitness, a complete change in environment is a further upstream concept or a further upstream decision than just working out. If you change your environment, you won't be tempted to indulge in palatable foods or foods that just are not in line with your goals. When you change the strength training environment, not just going from like inside to outside, but let's say in the context of, I did a video on this. It was one of our students who came to us. His name was Brian. I'll post his success story here in the corner. He came to us. He had to recertify his level 2 SFG skills, his level 2 certification for kettlebell training. And he had been trying all of the pressing. He was like, I've been doing all kinds of pressing. I've got to press the 48 kilo bell. And right now the 40 kilogram bell feels like what the 48 should probably feel like. He says, I've been doing all the pressing. I've got 5 weeks and I'm freaking out. I need help. So what we did was we changed the environment of pressing. We took him from vertical pressing, right, pressing overhead, to horizontal pressing. And we started working on his power push-up. So at a certain point, your nervous system can start to reject the kettlebell press, as an example. And you need to change environments, but while still working on pressing. So that would be an example of an upstream decision. It's not just being proactive, right? Doing the work, being healthy. Those are proactive measures. We want to think upstream. And that's what this video series is going to be about. I did another video on built-in safety mechanisms. Built-in safety mechanisms is an upstream strategy. What does that mean? Well, if we look at kettlebells, this is one of the great values of using kettlebells is you can only lift a weight that you can pick up off the ground. And not only that, but you can only lift a weight that you can carry. Right. So if we look at the kettlebell front squat is an upstream exercise. You cannot squat more weight than you can carry because the limiting factor in the double front squat is going to be your shoulders. And especially if you're using classic size kettlebells, the heavier the weight becomes, the center of mass changes, and the center of mass moves forward more. So if you start to sit back and hinge back, so the kettlebell front squat is more in line to like an Olympic front squat where you're going straight up and down, right? Because you got to keep that weight on your chest. But the moment you start to spill over, you're going to lose those bells. Same thing with deadlift. Deadlift is an upstream exercise. You can only lift what you can carry. You don't need a spotter. You don't need a spotter for your deadlift. You don't need a spotter for your front squat. Um, those are examples of exercises that have built-in safety mechanisms. The moment that you can't carry it, the moment that you can't pick it up, the lift is over. So those are upstream exercises. Growing in virtue is another example of upstream thinking. There's a concept that we have that we teach our students inside of our program called the strength engine concept. So the strength engine concept is 3 parts. It's taking a less is more approach to your training, and within that, taking the less is more approach, there's 5 parts. So number 1, understanding the concepts of strength training. When you understand why you're doing something, like the how becomes easier. So understanding the concepts first. Then from there, you can start to put those concepts into a practice versus just working out. And the third part of a less is more approach would be understanding and knowing how to deploy the professional applications of tension, knowing how to generate tension, knowing when to dial it up and dial it back. The fourth part is dominanta, the ability to shift your focus, the ability to build the skill of vision, and think of what are the muscles that I need to fire? Like, how do I connect my body versus focusing on pure tension? Because if you make tension the focus, you're going to miss the lift. So it's knowing how to shift your focus to the lift while also focusing on the exercises that you need to, while focusing on like the muscles that you need to connect versus just how heavy the weight is. Like dominanta comes in many different forms. And so dominanta is part of that less is more approach. Mastering leverage, knowing how to mastering leverage through posture and positioning. So strength training, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, grappling, those all share in the same principles, posture and positioning. The stronger your posture is, the better position that you can get into, the more leverage you're going to have over the weight that you're lifting or over the training partner that you're working with. So the stronger your posture is, the stronger your position is, and the stronger your position is, the more leverage you have ultimately. So that's the framework there. So that's all less is more approach. Fewer moving parts in your training with single kettlebells over double kettlebells. Focusing on building one exercise, one discipline at a time. We talked about this in our 5 rules of discipline episode, building one discipline or one skill at a time. The more complicated your life becomes, right? If you're trying to do like the family thing, the career thing, the fitness thing, like if you're trying to do all the things, life is pretty complicated. And the more complicated your life becomes, the more simple you want your training to be. The fewer moving parts you want moving around in your training. When you're trying to do all these different things, what happens is it becomes unrepeatable. So the framework, the formula, if you will, for success in terms of getting stronger, building a more physically capable body is the more simple that you can make the process, the more repeatable that process becomes. And the more repeatable that process becomes, the more consistent you're going to be with your efforts towards attaining the goals that you've set for yourself, towards attaining the results that you've envisioned in your mind before you even got started. But if you complex the hell out of things, you're not going to get there. High accessibility in your training, body weight training, kettlebell training, barbell training, each of these have degrees of accessibility. Body weight's going to be the most accessible because wherever you're at, you've got your gym. You can work on body weight mobility, push-ups, squats, pull-ups, chin-ups. You can train wherever you're at. Kettlebells is kind of like that sweet spot. You can take a kettlebell with you pretty much anywhere you want to go, right? But the limitation there is it's a fixed weight. But you make up for what you lack in intensity, you can make up in volume and effort, right? Barbell training, it's got, I mean, the you can pack as much weight as you want on it, right? So you can build tons of strength. It works your back very well, but you can't pack it up in your car when you're going on family vacation. So all of these have like, pros and cons to them. But the more accessible your training is, the more consistent you're going to be, right? So high accessibility, fewer moving parts, a less is more approach. This is part of that strength engine concept. And this is an upstream strategy. Developing your skills. That's part of that practicing versus working out. When you practice versus working out, you're going to develop your skill sets, and your skill sets are your default settings. So anytime you come across difficulty, when a problem does present itself, you're going to default back to the skills that you've developed. Okay, so we always default back to our level of training. Another example of upstream thinking is learning the clean before you learn the swing. That would be an example there, because when you learn how to pattern the clean first, you can train one rep at a time. You can slow things down, and ultimately slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? That's what we know. So these are all examples of upstream thinking and upstream strength strategies. And there are many that I have to share with you, but I want to share just probably the three core pieces. Like if I were to break it down to like a 30,000 foot view of what some of these strategies are, that's what we're going to talk about today. So upstream strength strategy number one is what we call a performance progression training system. I've talked about this ad nauseum on the channel because it's very important. So if you want to build a stronger and leaner and more capable body in less time, you need a customizable strategy that is measurable, particularly a performance progression training system. And what this does is it guides you through all the phases of strength training, knowing how and when to strength train for strength endurance, muscle building, i.e. hypertrophy is the fancy word there, maximal strength training, and power. So this is what a 30,000 foot view of our system that we coach our students through would look like. You can see we have functional movement patterns, then we've got functional performance, and we've got functional skill. I talked about this pyramid of progression. I believe it was our video on kettlebell flows, I think it was, and how kettlebell flows represent that high functional skill. Also inside of that high functional skill, we find sports skill. So sports skill could be categorized, or underneath sports skill, we would have, I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to take up boxing, BJJ, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting. Like those are all high level skills. Learning the long cycle, clean and jerk. Those are high level skills. I don't recommend starting there because that's the top of the pyramid. But the problem is most kettlebell beginners and even advanced athletes approach this pyramid upside down. For example, like I just mentioned, functional skill. We start by running. We start by getting into martial arts. And what happens is once we start with those high-end skills, then we think, well, shoot, now I need to build a base of performance, also known as general physical preparedness, or GPP. I need to start building a base of physical performance to support this skill training that I'm doing. And eventually what happens is your body can't keep up. Your body begins to break down. You start having sore, achy shoulders, hips, knees and ankles. And what happens is the result is you have to back up. You have to take a step back and address your mobility, your flexibility. Basically, you have to rebuild your foundation. And that just leads to wasted time. That leads to unnecessary failures. That leads to a loss of money. Money is time. Time is money. Just a lot of things go wrong that we don't realize until it happens. So what we do is we end up training backwards on two levels. We train backwards on a macro level, right? This 30,000 foot view, this whole performance, this idea of performance progression. And we train backwards on a micro level. Training backwards on a micro level looks like this. The execution of the session, right? So the macro level is the performance progression approach. The micro level is the execution of a training session. I know this is true because I've made this mistake for years before I became a coach. And I see a lot of beginners and even advanced athletes. And when I say athletes, I mean, I'm talking just advanced fitness enthusiasts that have been doing fitness for a long time, is we start with intensity first. How heavy can I go? Because we hear trainers and coaches, and I say trainers and coaches with parentheses because oftentimes, yeah, I won't get into that. Trainers and coaches and influencers online say you got to lift heavy. Like if you want to get strong, you got to lift heavy. Well, that's a half truth, and that's a nuanced truth as well. But we often start with intensity. So because you don't know what you don't know, you start with intensity. How heavy can I go? Because everybody's telling me to go heavy. And then from there, we start wanting to do more work on top of that. So we start getting into density training. Density is doing more work in the same amount of time or the same work in less time. Ultimately, you're doing more. The idea is to do more work, and you're trying to do more work with this heavy weight. And if you haven't developed your skills, things are going to fall apart. And ultimately, what that leads to is a lack of consistency. You can't be consistent because you're getting injured. You're bumping into aches and pains. And aches and pains, it could be from lack of mobility. It could be many things, right? So that is what it looks like to train backwards on a micro level. So in our coaching at Hardstyle, we teach our students a method that we call E.Y.T. It's pronounced eat, like you got to eat, pronounced E.Y.T. And it stands for earn your training. You got to earn your training. Okay. So this approach is about long-term progress. This approach is about longevity, and it's ultimately a reversal of the aforementioned tactic, right? So before I mentioned, we often start with intensity and then we want to do more work. So density. And then from there, we can't be consistent. So we teach our students, we flip-flop it, which is the way it should be run in my professional opinion and in my experience coaching real people in the trenches for over 14 years. Number one, start with consistency. In the Strong First system, this is principle number one of designing a program. It's called the continuity of the training process. So, a fancy term for be consistent with your training. How about you train 3 days per week, keep your schedule as consistent as possible? How about you train 3 days per week, 30 minutes each time, and you're practicing, and you just do sets of 3. And the only thing that you should vary should be maybe the volume. Maybe do 15 minutes on Monday, 20 minutes on Wednesday, and 25 minutes on Friday. So the only variable there is the volume. And let's say you do that for a month. Track your total volume, just see how you do. Build your skills. Practice in that time frame. And this is what we call a volume accumulation cycle. Just get your volume in, literally get your reps in. After you've been consistent for 4, 8, 12 weeks, then you can start focusing on density. So after 1 to 2 cycles of a steady practice, and when I say a cycle is about 4 weeks. So let's say you run 2 cycles. So 8 weeks, you've been consistent. You've been working on, dialing in your kettlebell press or something like that. Now you can focus on density. And what we do is we tend to provide our students with a goal. So let's say for the past month on Mondays, you were doing, let's just say 10 sets in 20 minutes or 10 sets in 15 minutes, like whatever that time frame it is that you choose. Okay, if you did 10 sets, let's set a goal of 20% increase. So let's set a goal of 10. So now in month 3, right, so the third month, we did 2 months consecutive. So let's say in the third month, I'm going to do 12 reps. And then you build consistency around that before you move up. And so right there, just by going up by 20%, we've created a density protocol because now you're doing 12 sets in the exact same time frame. And you rinse and repeat. Once you build up enough volume around 12 sets, Then you add another 20%. Eventually, you'll reach the point of diminished returns where you can't add any more. Once you've done that, once you've exhausted all variables, once you've reached your genetic potential of how much volume you can do, you have earned your training. And that's when you can increase the intensity, right? So now we're at intensity. So once, let's say you have a 24 kilo bell, you're doing sets of 3, and eventually you've maxed it out. You can't do any more sets. You can't do any more sets in 15 minutes. Well, now you've built your volume. Now you've earned the training, and now you can progress to 28 kilo, or you stay with 24, but now you progress to sets of 5. You see? So you can increase the effort or you can increase the intensity. So effort and intensity are not the same thing. Effort is, let's say, the context of 5 reps. You're doing 5 repetitions and you can do like 20 sets. That is a high effort, low intensity, because it's low intensity because you can do 20 sets of 5. You can't do 20 sets of 5 with your 1 rep maximum because the intensity, the weight is too heavy. So you can either increase the effort or the dense or the intensity. And effort and density, they're probably cousins because you're putting in more effort to get more work done in that time frame. But intensity in this context would be increasing the weight. But if you're not ready to increase the weight, then you can just increase the effort by going to sets of 5. And I would probably stop at sets of 5 and keep your reps anywhere between 1 to 5 reps. So once you've exhausted all variables, then you can increase the weight. The result of this approach is long-term progress. The result is better health, longevity, and ultimately more time to do what you enjoy doing. Because, I mean, if you're only working out, when I say working out, I'm talking about practicing, I'm talking about training. And you're doing this in 30 minutes, 3 times a week, that's 90 minutes. You've got more time to do what you enjoy doing. Just remember, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So if you follow a system where it's just random workouts and random challenges and whatnot, that's going to get you random results. And the results are going to be unrepeatable because you're not sure of all the moving pieces, all the variables, what it is that got you the result. So therefore, you can't repeat it. Remember, I talked about the strength engine concept. You want to have fewer moving parts in the training. So in the context of consistency, density, intensity, the only moving part was the volume. Everything else was consistent. Not just the practice itself, but the reps were consistent on a session basis. Your schedule was consistent on a session basis. The weight you were using was consistent. So I'm not just talking about the actual consistency of doing the workout consistently. Consistency is on many levels here. So this is what our system would look like on a 5,000 foot view. So if we're at a 30,000 foot view and we see the performance progression, this is what it would look like on a micro level, right? 5,000 foot view. So what we do is we take them through foundations. So the first 1 to 4 months of the program, the first 4 months of the program, they'd be working on the 5 essential movement patterns. So the goal here would be to build their foundation of functional movement patterns, then moving to performance, and lastly, sports skill. And when I say skill, because I've talked about this in a couple of other contexts. When I say skill in this context, I'm talking about sports training, running a marathon, BJJ, martial arts, long cycle, clean and jerk. Like that's high skill. I'm not talking about the skill of strength. The skill of strength being practicing, working on your setup, like getting tight, working on your breathing, working on your dominanta, like those things. That's strength is a skill. Okay, so these are 2 different contexts here. So we're building in foundations, we're building their movement competency essentially across these 7 fundamental patterns that we should be able to do on a daily basis. Things like pushing, pulling, hinging, squatting, rotation or anti-rotation, carrying things, gait. And these 5 exercises, deadlift, clean, press, squat, lunge, address all of those. So we take them through a specific assessment on those 5 patterns. Because we got the push would be the kettlebell press. The pull, that would be the deadlift and the clean. The hinge, that would be deadlift and clean again. The squat, that's an obvious one. Rotation and anti-rotation. So single arm deadlift, single arm clean. So single arm exercises. Can their body resist rotation? Carrying. So after they've cleaned, carrying the bell in the rack position. And then gait, walking. That's our lunge, right? So we can test their movement competency, and we're building their entire foundation on those 7 patterns. And the key here in foundations for our students is to build one skill at a time. Remember, the fewer moving parts, the better. So the core training that they're doing in foundations is learning the press, and then the clean and press, and then the squat, and then the lunge. So we're introducing one skill at a time, right? That's I believe the first rule of developing a discipline is one thing at a time, because that is fewer moving parts, which means it leads to repeatability, and repeatability leads to consistency. Months 5 through 7 is intermediate. This is their first exploration with athletic training. We start teaching them the kettlebell swing and get into loaded mobility and stability training with a get up. So in the previous cycle, foundations, months 1 through 4, they were doing body weighted mobility and stability training. Now that we've built that behavior, we can now load that behavior, okay, and reinforce that behavior. Months 8 through 10, intermediate 1.2, this is where we introduced the kettlebell snatch. Phenomenal exercise, proven endurance and work capacity. They've now learned the projection of force. They know how to swing, they know how to clean, but the clean is number 1 because the clean is essentially the gateway to the snatch. It teaches you the vertical trajectory of force. And then also we start getting into calisthenics. We start teaching them tactical pull-up and all the regressions that go along with that. We start teaching them two-handed push-up, one-arm push-up, one-arm, one-leg push-up, and all of the regressions that come along with that. Months 11 through 13, this is intermediate 1.3. This is all about synergy. So this is where training gets hyper efficient for our students. Their training session on average is about 20 minutes. So for the first 10 months, they invested a lot of time in building all of their skills one at a time. We built deadlift, clean, press, squat, lunge. Then we got into swing. Then we got into snatch. And now we can synergize that and get into training methods like complexes, chains, hybrids. We can start expanding. And that's what, and as we train multiple, now remember, one of the 5th rule of discipline was synergy, training multiple disciplines at a time, right? So this is where we're at now in months 11 through 13, training multiple skills at one time. If you do this backwards and you start training, if you're new to kettlebells and you start getting into complexes right away, you're doing yourself a disservice because you haven't learned the skills of all the other exercises. And when you start getting tired and you meet adversity, your body's going to fall apart because you don't know how to manage the tension, right? Professional applications of tension. That's part of the strength engine concept. If you don't know how to apply tension appropriately, you're just going to crumble underneath the 1 or 2 kettlebells. And so we spent all that time for those first 10 months of building that foundation of fundamental movements and functional performance. So all of this is under the umbrella still of functional performance. So just imagine when your training becomes that efficient because of all the time you've put in, imagine what you could do. I mean, ask yourself, what could you do with all that time? And if I'm working out like an hour a week, 90 minutes a week, what can I do with all that time? And this is what I mean when I say our students are able to do this in about 90 minutes per week so they can ultimately have more time to do what they enjoy doing. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here, right? At the end of the day, we want our strength training to serve us so we can do other things, not try to be the best at exercise. That's what I mean by that. We should not be spending an hour or 2 hours a day in the gym because it's keeping us from doing things we really enjoy doing. And if that's hanging out with your kids or camping or hiking or doing jujitsu, like whatever that is, we don't want to be spending all of our time in the gym. So how do we want our training to serve us? Just imagine what you could do with all that time. Months 14 through 16, this is advanced, air quotes advanced. I still believe you're an intermediate between up from 0 to the first 5 years of your training. But just for this example, advanced training. This is the top of the pyramid, right? This is kettlebell athletic training. We have specific kettlebell athletic training protocols that we take them through. At this point, a lot of our students have new goals beyond, weight loss, leaning out, losing body fat, whatever, however you want to describe that. They've earned their training. Like, man, you know what? Now I'm stronger. I'm more mobile. Like, I'm feeling really good. Now I want to run that half marathon. I've always wanted to do that. Or, man, now I've always wanted to start martial arts, but I was afraid of getting hurt. So now they've got new goals. And so now they've built, they've built 13 months, over a year. They've invested over a year in building their foundation of functional movements and functional performance. And this is where we synergize all of their skills. So once they go through all 16 months, they've learned everything that they need to know to be more stronger and capable. After the 16 months, we teach them how to synergize. Again, eventually it comes down to synergy, doing multiple things at one time. We teach them how to synergize all of the skills that they've developed. How to train the kettlebell press and how to train the kettlebell press while maintaining your kettlebell snatch skills and your snatch endurance. How to build the deadlift while doing this. Like, how to do this while doing this. So how to synergize multiple disciplines at once. That's what happens beyond 16 months. And if you take a look at this 5,000-foot view, take a look closely at this performance progression system. Both macro and micro levels are based on upstream thinking. So at a micro level, everything starts slow and then speeds up, right? So if we look at months 1 through 4, most of those movements are slow movements: deadlift, press, squat, lunge. Those are slow patterns. Those are what we would call grind exercises. Those are your slow moving exercises. And there's only one dynamic exercise or one ballistic exercise, and that's the clean. But even though it's a ballistic exercise, the nature of that exercise is it can be trained in a slow manner. Compared to the swing, that's a dynamic exercise, you can't course correct the swing once it's floating at the top. Once it's in motion, you can't course correct. With the clean, you can clean it, park, you can hold it. So now you're working on your carry. Is my shoulder packed down? Are my abs braced? Are my legs tight? Like, you can work on one thing at a time, making things more simple and more repeatable. So even though it's a dynamic exercise, the nature of it is it can be trained and practiced in a slow manner. Then as we get to the next phase in training, kettlebell swing, things start to speed up a little bit. Once we get into snatch, things speed up again. Once we get into complexes, moving parts, things are going faster. And then, of course, you got your athletic training. And so it's designed this way because it's based on upstream thinking. Because why is it designed this way? Because this is how we develop as a person. This is called neurodevelopmental sequencing, right? So when you're born, when you're conceived in the womb, your vestibular system starts developing 21 days after conception. And as you begin to develop, and as you're born, you go through a very specific sequence of developing, knowing how to control your head. Knowing how to control your head is your first strength training as a baby. Knowing how to control your head, knowing how to roll from your back to your belly to your back, learning how to push back and rock back and forth and crawl, then eventually, stand. That's a specific sequence that we all go through, and you can't skip any pieces in the process. So if you look at this system, you can't skip pieces. You need to make this progression. If you skip pieces, this is where things start to break down. So when you have this in place, it prevents potential problems from even happening just because you have it in place. So months 1 through 4, like I said, are slow: deadlift, press, squat, lunge. Things speed up at the swing, months 5 through 7, months 8 through 10, speed up some more. Then months 14 through 16, athletic training. It's all based on developmental sequencing. Okay. So this entire upstream process of planning, what this does is this allows our students to start where they're at in a slow and a controlled manner. And it progresses their performance, allowing them to earn and enjoy their training process at the same time. And regardless of their experience, everyone who comes to hardstyle starts a foundation. So it doesn't matter if you've been using kettlebells for 10 or 15 years. Doesn't matter if you're, a marathon athlete. Like, none of that matters. We all need to start at foundations. Why? Because I said we often train backwards, and it ultimately does does us more harm than good. So if you want to boost and accelerate your performance and your results before the training even begins, then upstream thinking and following a performance progression system is a non-negotiable. The second upstream strategy that we take our students through is something that we call recovery accelerating mechanisms. That's a big fancy word for mobility, stability, recovery, longevity, injury prevention. That's a fancy word to say all of that. Um, this is about efficient movement preparation. I'm not a big fan of movement prep. When I say movement prep, I'm talking about spending 15 minutes on a foam roller, stretching, that kind of thing. This is completely different. This is about efficient movement preparation, recovery, and longevity. So, at the name of the game here, friends, is longevity. As you age, as we all do, we're not going to, I mean, maybe we will, but it's not going to be about how many snatches you did in 5 minutes, how many deadlifts you did, how much weight you lost. At the end of the day, the name of the game is longevity. Your health will always be your greatest concern. The ability to go out and play with your kids, like, can I go and do this, strength training session, but then still go do, 2 or 3 hours of pitch and catch with my son playing baseball? Can I take my daughter out and do these things with her and create memories with her? Can I take my wife out and do these things? Can I take the kids camping? Am I functional? Can I do these things? That's ultimately the goal here. And there are 4 upstream strategies that we build out for our students. Number 1, we build them out a test retest method. This is a strategy that we call the G.F.E, stands for ground force evaluation. What this does is this sets a baseline of their movement competency. There's a series of movements intentionally put together to set their baseline of how they're moving for the day and basically what they can expect out of that session. And then the retest gives them feedback. Did the training session you just did it give more to you than it took away? Is that G.F.E that we just did, because you do it in the beginning, we do it at the end. If you do it in the beginning, like, oh, I feel unstable here, this feels tight, X, Y, and Z, and then we do the strength work, and then we do it again, are you better or are you worse? So it's immediate feedback. And what happens is it becomes a repeatable process to improve performance before the training even happens. Upper body recovery mechanism is the second one. Think of all the things that we do sitting down. I mean, I'm sitting here right now doing this podcast, but we sit all day at work. Then we sit down when we eat. And then oftentimes we go and we sit on a machine and we push and we pull things. And the root cause of a lot of shoulder and lower back injuries is something called the upper crossed syndrome. Upper crossed syndrome is when the head begins to shift forward. The shoulders round. You've seen this, shoulders rounded forward, head protruding forward. Ultimately, what happens is we end up living in a flexed environment and there's no extension in our day. And this is why kettlebells are superior, in my professional opinion, because all of the movements, everything that we train with kettlebells puts you in an extended environment, which stimulates all of the muscles responsible for your posture. So the nature of strength training with kettlebells puts you in an extended environment. And remember what I said about upstream thinking? A change in environment has a greater impact on your results. So, and in another example of Brian, change in his press environment, moving him from vertical pressing to horizontal pressing, the nature of that had a huge impact on his results. And in less than 5 weeks, he pressed the beast by accident. And he even did 100 snatches with the 28 kilo without training for high volume snatching, all because of the upstream thinking of the program that we put him through. So kettlebells, by virtue of strength training with kettlebells, is an upstream strategy in and of itself. The third mechanism that we take them through, the third upstream strategy in terms of recovery accelerating mechanisms, is a lower body recovery mechanism. So Herb Brooks, he was the Olympic hockey coach for the American team in the 1980s. He had a very famous phrase that he would say, that he would yell at his team. He would say, "The legs feed the wolf. The legs feed the wolf," meaning that the stronger your legs are, the healthier that your legs are, the more mobile your legs and your hips are, the stronger your overall body will be. And in consequence, the legs feed the wolf. The moment a wolf cannot move quickly, it dies. Okay, it becomes a weak point in the pack. And oftentimes Americans, we fall victim to what is called lower crossed syndrome. Okay, this is where our hips get tight. Okay, our we have this like anterior shift of our lower back. So just imagine two opposable forces always pulling on each other. So like that upper body, like the upper body, the lower body also suffers from the effects of sitting, right? Your hips are always in a flexed state. And when we live in a flexed state, or when we live in a flexed environment, the muscles in the front of the body become tight, hip flexors, right? The muscles that bring your knee to your chest. Your hip flexors become tight, and the muscles in the back of your body, hamstrings, glutes, they become weak. Those are the muscles that are responsible for posture, speed, agility, quickness. They become weak. And as a result, you're not going to get much out of your swings. You're not going to get much out of your squats. You're not going to get much out of your running. And essentially, what you're doing is you're leaving strength, performance, and you're leaving results on the table because your hip flexors and your glutes are neurologically connected. When you sit, and that's all that you do, and you don't get up and you don't move around, your hip flexors become tight, glutes become weak. And so ultimately, leaving results on the table. And the fourth strategy that we build out for them is what we call a total body recovery mechanism, particularly a total body strength and power sequence. And the National Academy of Sports Medicine said in its curriculum that optimal performance is determined by the posture of the lumbopelvic hip complex and during functional activities. And so the lumbopelvic hip complex is there's a concept called the four knots. The four knots are your shoulders and your hips, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And that is your lumbopelvic hip, everything in between that. So the root cause of most shoulder and lower back injuries, right, as I mentioned, is upper cross syndrome. Lower cross syndrome is our hips. When one of those knots go like break, when they become too loose, become weak, our performance suffers and our body begins to break down. So the moment that those four knots break, movement viruses, I call these movement viruses, basically like postural distortion patterns, like your poor posture, those start to creep in. And if you notice, if you're noticing that you keep bumping into tweaks and strains in your workouts, then it's likely you have undetected movement viruses, right? Muscle imbalances as a result of poor posture or as a result of a previous injury. And what this does is this triggers the cumulative injury cycle. So the cumulative injury cycle, let's say you have a muscle imbalance. From there, that muscle imbalance, you start to experience tissue trauma. Tissue gets tight. The fascia that covers your muscles gets tight. Then that leads to inflammation. That eventually leads to muscle spasms, adhesions, also known as like knots. And then from there, altered neuromuscular control, right? The ability for you to control your body through movement. That leads to muscle imbalances. And then you're trapped in this cycle because ultimately movement is a behavior. So I've got two kids, 14 and 9. And if they display like bad behavior and I don't correct that behavior, things get worse. Good luck trying to correct that behavior as a teenager. Same thing goes for our strength training. If we have poor posture, tight shoulders, tight hips, and then we strength train on top of that, we're only reinforcing bad behavior. But the moment that we see those behaviors start to present themselves, we need to correct that behavior. And that's where your recovery mechanisms come into play. So if you want to improve your performance, if you want to see better results with your strength training, particularly with your kettlebells, then having recovery accelerating mechanisms in place is an essential piece. The third and final upstream strength strategy is coaching, support, and community. So when I first got into jiu-jitsu, this was around 2001. So before I got into jiu-jitsu, one of my friends of mine, he was something like, "Hey man, have you ever tried jiu-jitsu? Like I've been training like this Brazilian style of jiu-jitsu." And there was a martial arts store. It wasn't even a martial arts store. It was like an Oriental store. And it was called Chan's Imports here in Corpus Christi. It was in the mall. And I used to go by there a lot just because I had an affinity for all things like martial arts and whatnot. And I knew he had like martial arts stuff there. And one day I was buying nunchucks. Don't ask me why. I was buying nunchucks and I saw like this video series of a gentleman named Joe Morera. And he is a well known jiu-jitsu master. And I believe he's a coral belt. And he had a video series. And I was like, hey, that's jiu-jitsu. So I bought it, went home, watched it all. And then eventually I went and tried out jiu-jitsu for the first time and I got crushed. And I quickly realized trying to do things on your own just isn't going to work. It's not going to carry over very well. The moment that I understood the value of a coach, a support system, and a community, like the moment that I was surrounded by that community of other, jiu-jitsu guys, that's when my game took off. And so why do I tell you this? Because having a coach, a support system, a community is probably the most impactful upstream decision that you can make. So if you want to improve your performance, if you want to see real see in the mirror results, investing into a coach is a non-negotiable. And when you invest into a coach, you're not investing in workouts, nutrition plans, recovery mechanisms. You're not investing into any of that. You're investing into something more nuanced. What you're investing into when you invest into a coach is you're investing into speed. That's what you're investing into. You're investing into time. You're investing and leveraging the expertise, the knowledge of somebody who's done what it is that you want to do. So if whatever it is that you want to attain with your kettlebells, there is someone out there, an expert who has invested their entire life studying, practicing, and teaching what it is that you want to learn. And it would be in your best interest to find this person and leverage their decades of experience. Why? Because this allows you to avoid unnecessary setbacks like injuries, wasted time, wasted money, and unnecessary failures, as I mentioned earlier in this video. And so why is any of this? Why are any of these upstream strategies, thinking upstream, like why is any of this stuff important? And what does it have to do with you and your results? Well, it's important because every system is perfectly designed to get you the results that it gets. If you want random, unrepeatable results, then you should follow random and unrepeatable workouts, etc. If you want consistent and perpetual progress and the ability to know when you're going to attain the exact result that you have in your mind when you first got started, then you need a proven, time-tested system that has these three pillars of success. Number one, a performance progression training system. Number two, recovery accelerating mechanisms. Number three, coaching, support, and community. The downstream effects of these strategies is profound, and I can't even put it into words. So just remember that every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. If this video helped you out, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the like button, turn on notifications for more videos here on the channel. And if you need help, if you want to learn how to use kettlebells to build a stronger, leaner, and more capable body in about 90 minutes per week, click the link in the description section. We have a 10-day trial to our coaching services where you can come in to the academy and you can work with us directly for 10 straight days and get a feel if this is something that you would like to do with us. Why this 10-day trial? Here's what happens. Here's the whole intention of the trial. Number one, the goal is to get you immediate results within 10 days. And I know that we will do that. Number two, it's to allow you to experience our coaching, our system, and our community. I'm a big believer that you know whether or not you want to be around a certain people or stay in a certain room within the first 10 to 15 seconds. So that's a key reason for the 10-day trial. And number two, really, we want to establish, would it make sense for us to work together, to continue working together to help you to attain your goals using kettlebells? And I believe that we will do that within those 10 days. We want to make sure that we're a good fit for you, but we also want to make sure that you're a good fit for us and for our community. So if you want to build a stronger, leaner, more capable body in less time, so you can do more things that you enjoy doing, click the link in the description section, set up your 10-day trial. From there, you'll enter your name, your email. And what this is you're setting up a 10 to 15-minute call. The whole intention of this call is just to get your trial set up, add you to the community, and then from there, start getting your results within 10 days. If you got any questions, reach out to us directly, 361-271-1993, or you can shoot us an email, service@hardstylekettlebell.com. And we look forward to seeing you at Hardstyle. Appreciate you watching and see you on the next one. Peace.